March 17, 1943, North Atlantic, 400 miles south of Iceland. Convoy HX, 229-41 ships, 140,000 tons of cargo, pushing through a storm that could break steel. Every hull screams against the sea. Propellers bite water and spit cavitation bubbles, tiny explosions the Germans can hear from 80 miles away. The convoy moves, but it is not silent. It is broadcasting. Above deck, Captain James Bannerman grips binoculars crusted with ice. Below, in the ship's galley, 8-year-old Thomas Patrick Lawson, cook of the SS William Eustace, washes dishes as the ship rolls 40 degrees. And beneath them, 600 yards off the port, beam U-758 listens. Kapitänleutnant Helmut Mansek, age 31, leans into the hydrophone console. His operator whispers, "Contact, bearing 280, multiple screws, heavy machinery noise." Mansek smiles. The Atlantic speaks, and it tells him everything he needs. No sonar, no radar, just the orchestra of Allied propellers vibrating through salt water. In March 1943, German U-boats will sink 567,000 tons of Allied shipping, more than in any other month of the war. Britain's food reserves, 12 weeks. Every day, convoys cross this ocean of sound, and every day, the ocean betrays them. Hydrophones can hear a convoy's mechanical heartbeat from 80 nautical miles. A single Liberty ship can be tracked from 12. Propeller cavitation, turbine resonance, hull vibration, the acoustic fingerprint of industrial civilization in motion. The Allies try everything: zigzag patterns, radio silence, active sonar pings. But sonar only works when a U-boat is directly ahead and the Germans attack from the flanks or the dark surface at night. They hunt by hearing alone. For every scientist studying sound, another 100 men die inside it. In March, 22 merchant ships vanish in a single week. Admiral Karl Dönitz calls it the greatest convoy battle of all time. Winston Churchill calls it the one thing that truly frightened him. No Allied admiral knows it yet, but the problem is unsolvable, at least, according to every physicist alive. You cannot make a Liberty ship quiet enough. Its 15-foot propeller displaces 200,000 tons of water per minute. Every rotation detonates cavitation bubbles across a spectrum of 1 to 100 kilohertz, the exact range of German hydrophones. It is not a flaw. It is physics. But deep inside one of these steel hulls, a man without rank or degree begins to question the obvious. Thomas Lawson, merchant cook, dropout at 14, has survived 3 convoy runs. He doesn't sleep much. During off hours, he stands in the engine room, among pipes and boilers, listening. He listens to the turbines, to the scream of steam lines, to the pulse of the ship itself. He doesn't yet know it, but what he's hearing isn't just machinery, it's communication. The mechanical language of war. Soon, a torpedo will hit a ship nearby. Lawson will hear something no one else does. Not the explosion. The silence that follows. And from that silence, he will build an idea so reckless it borders on madness. An idea the Royal Navy will laugh at, arrest him for, and later steal. An idea that will collapse the wolf packs of the Atlantic and turn the hunters into the hunted. Because in 1943, the ocean could hear men die. But for the first time, one man was about to teach it how to go deaf. Liverpool, March 1943. The Western Approach's command is running out of explanations. For 3.5 years, the Allies have fought a war they cannot see, an invisible war conducted in sound. Every meeting room smells of coffee, paper, and fatigue. Admirals speak in tonnage lost, not in ships. Britain has 3 months of food, and the Atlantic, their artery of life, is bleeding faster every week. The enemy's advantage is not firepower, it's hearing. German hydrophone systems, the Gruppenhochgerät, refined through a decade of naval engineering, can detect the propeller noise of a Liberty ship from 80 nautical miles away. Their precision is surgical. A convoy is not a cloud of sound. It's a coordinate system. Meanwhile, Allied technology is blind. The British Admiralty has deployed active sonar ASDIC on every escort vessel. But sonar only works when aimed directly ahead. and it only functions when transmitting. Every ping reveals as much as it detects. U-boats simply listen, wait, and attack from where sonar cannot see. It becomes an asymmetric equation. The hunter hears everything. The hunted cannot even hear itself dying. By 1943, convoy losses exceed shipyard output. For the first time since Napoleon, Britain faces the possibility of starvation not through invasion, but through arithmetic. Inside the Admiralty's archives, the numbers are terrifying. 3,000 merchant ships sunk since 1939, 30,000 sailors lost. It's not the chaos of war, it's the mathematics of noise. So the scientists get to work. In London, physicist Professor Patrick Blackett, Director of Naval Operational Research, drafts a secret memorandum. His analysis is clear, mathematical, and hopeless. Merchant vessel propeller cavitation and hull resonance produce broadband acoustic signatures detectable at extreme range. Without fundamental redesign, acoustic concealment is impossible. Dr. Harold Burrus, Chief Naval Architect at the Admiralty's Research Laboratory, expands on it. A Liberty ship's propeller rotates at 76 revolutions per minute, displacing over 200,000 tons of water per hour through a 15-foot blade diameter. Each collapse of a cavitation bubble creates a micro shockwave, releasing energy across a range between 1 and 100 kHz, precisely the frequency band to which German hydrophones are tuned. The conclusion: to silence a ship would require redesigning the entire propulsion system, 6 months of dry dock, new foundries, new propellers, and an engineering workforce that simply doesn't exist. The British Empire could build 1,000 tanks faster than it could build a quiet ship. At the Atlantic Convoy Conference on March 4, 1943, Rear Admiral Leonard Murray of the Royal Canadian Navy delivers the verdict in one line: "Gentlemen, we're losing. Our escorts can't hear the U-boats because of our own noise. The enemy can hear us from 50 miles away." Around the table, proposals flood in like dying signals. Install vibration dampers on all machinery. $250,000 per ship, 12 weeks in dock. Coat hulls with rubber. Proven useless saltwater tears it off within weeks. Redesign propellers. Theoretically sound, practically impossible. Each idea collapses under the weight of scale. There are 2,400 merchant ships in the Atlantic convoy system. At current capacity, retrofitting them would take a century. What emerges is not just an engineering problem, it's a belief system. The Royal Navy's engineers believe in physics as immutable law. The Admiralty believes in hierarchy, and both believe that solutions can only come from above, from men with rank, credentials, or laboratories. They cannot conceive that the answer might come from someone who cooks their breakfast. By mid-March, the Western Approaches Command concludes there is no acoustic solution. The official directive reads like surrender. Convoy acoustic signatures are a fixed consequence of propulsion. The recommended countermeasure is increased escort density and aerial patrol coverage. Translation: if you cannot silence the ship, surround it with noise and hope for the best. Outside those rooms, the war continues to devour men. Every night, merchant convoys creep across an ocean wired with sound. Each propeller rotation broadcasts their position to an enemy they will never see. Each sinking ship confirms the same fatal law. The louder civilization grows, the easier it is to destroy. The industrial machine that feeds Britain also exposes it. Every engine, every turbine, every mechanical heartbeat becomes a lighthouse for predators in the deep. The same technology that sustains modernity betrays it a perfect irony of the industrial age. And yet, within that system of experts and doctrines, somewhere among the lower decks of a Liberty ship, a man begins to notice something everyone else dismisses. He doesn't have clearance, education, or authority, but he has ears, and he listens differently. In the age of machines, that is heresy, because in 1943, the greatest dogma of all is that only science can solve what science has created. But what if the machine could be tricked? What if the ocean, that perfect instrument of detection, could be used to hide, not reveal? Somewhere inside the SS William Eustace, a cook is about to test that thought, and the next chapter of the Battle of the Atlantic will be written not in a laboratory, but in Greece, heat, and steel. February 19th, 1943. Mid-Atlantic. Convoy SC 11863 ships spread across 9 columns. The SS William Eustace is in column 7, third position. The sky is black, the ocean is metal. Somewhere out there, the U-boats are listening. In the engine room, the temperature sits at 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Steam condenses on every surface, dripping onto the iron deck like rain. Thomas Lawson, the ship's cook, is crouched near the main steam line, sweating through his overalls. The first mate yells for him to leave. This is no place for galley hands. But Lawson doesn't move. He isn't there to work. He's there to listen. Above the roar of the turbines, something changes. A tremor, then a distant thump muffled by miles of water and steel. A torpedo strike. Not on them, but close. 2 columns over, another Liberty ship takes the hit. The sound travels through the hull like a heartbeat. Then, something impossible happens. It stops. Not just the noise of the explosion, everything. The ocean, the vibrations, the mechanical hum that fills the background of existence, gone. It is as if the sea itself exhales. The sound dies, and for a few seconds, the Atlantic goes completely still. Lawson presses his hand to the steel bulkhead. The ship feels quieter, not by perception, but by comparison. Something fundamental has changed. The dying ship, flooding with water, is no longer audible. He shouts over the turbines to the ship's engineer, a grim Scotsman named Donald Malleode. The sinking ship, it stopped making noise. Malleode wipes sweat from his brow, unimpressed. Of course it stopped. It's full of water. Lawson pushes. No, you don't understand. That's why the Germans can't hear it anymore. The engineer scowls. So what, Cook? You plan to flood the ship on purpose? But the thought sticks. Not for Malleode, for Lawson. When his shift ends, he takes a small notebook and begins sketching. Rough lines, crude diagrams, ideas for chambers filled with water around machinery, ballast tanks near the propeller shaft, controllable flooding systems that could dampen vibration without sinking the ship. It is nonsense. It is heresy. It is also the most original acoustic concept of the entire war. For 2 weeks, he obsesses. During every off-watch hour, Lawson returns to the engine room with his notebook. He listens. He compares the pitch of the turbines when the ship slows, when the propeller bites against different currents. He notices patterns, harmonics, resonances, frequencies that behave like music but lethal. The others laugh. Tommy's trying to outthink the ocean. Tommy's going to cook himself in that engine room before he cooks breakfast. But something in him refuses to stop. The idea grows teeth. He tests it against logic, and logic fails. He tests it against physics, and physics bends. By the time the William Eustace docks in Liverpool on March 24th, Lawson has made a decision that borders on delusion. He has 48 hours of shore leave. He doesn't drink. He doesn't sleep. He walks straight to the Western Approaches Command, the nerve center of the Royal Navy's Atlantic War. He is wearing a stained cook's uniform. He has no clearance, no invitation, no title, and he walks into Derby House headquarters of Britain's anti-submarine operations and asks to speak to an admiral. He is immediately arrested. 2 Royal Navy shore patrol officers drag him out of the lobby. "You can't be here, Yank," one of them says. Lawson protests. "I've got something that can stop the U-boats from hearing us." The guard smirks. "Everyone's got ideas. Get out before we throw you in a cell." But across the hall, a voice cuts through. Wait. The man who speaks is Commander Peter Gretton, age 29, veteran of 2 brutal convoy battles. He has lost 13 ships to wolf packs. His face looks older than his years. He's desperate for any advantage. "What did you say about convoy noise?" Gretton asks. Lawson explains. The flooding, the silence, the idea of using water to mask vibration. It sounds insane because it is. Gretton crosses his arms, skeptical. "Water inside a ship, Mr. Lawson, is called sinking, not if you control it," Lawson says quietly. "You're not flooding the ship, you're insulating it. Water absorbs vibration better than air or steel. You make the ship invisible to sound." There's a long pause. The young commander studies him, not the idea, but the conviction behind it. Finally, he mutters, "If this gets me court-martialed, you'd better be right." He takes Lawson to the dry dock. There, they find a small corvette, HMS Sunflower, undergoing repairs. Gretton gives the order, "We test it here. Nobody else needs to know." And so, over the next 3 days, a Royal Navy officer and a merchant cook begin welding oil drums and water chambers around a propeller shaft, building something no engineer would dare authorize. It is crude, it is illegal, it is genius, and within a week it will make the Atlantic go quiet. March 25th, 1943. HM Dockyard, Liverpool. The North Atlantic's most crucial war zone isn't in the ocean. It's here, among cranes, welding arcs, and the thunder of steel plates being riveted into hulls. Commander Peter Gretton and cook Thomas Lawson stand beside a corvette named HMS Sunflower, half disassembled, half drowned in scaffolding. "This is madness," mutters Lieutenant James Whitby, the ship's engineer. "Good," Gretton replies. "We need madness. The sensible men are losing the war." They begin. The first prototype of Lawson's idea, liquid acoustic dampening, is not a design. It's improvisation. Empty oil drums welded around the propeller shaft housing, sandbags stacked against the engine mounts, makeshift chambers filled with seawater to absorb vibration. Every regulation is broken, every manual violated. They work by lamplight, under tarps, to avoid the eyes of Admiralty inspectors. The dockyard foreman calls it plumbing with a death wish. 3 days later, HMS Sunflower is ready. March 28th, 1943, the first test. The ship motors down the Mersey River. The submarine HMS Trespasser, manned by a cooperative captain, submerges half a kilometre away. Hydrophones active. Lawson stands on the corvette's deck, grease-stained hands gripping the rail. If this fails, he'll be court-martialed or worse, laughed at forever. The test begins. Trespasser reports back by signal light. "Heard you clear as day. Engine noise normal. Failure." Whitby shakes his head. "Told you. Water doesn't stop sound. It transmits it." But Lawson notices something strange, a thin stream trickling from one of the drums. "They drained," he says. "We filled them when she was in dry dock. They're leaking. They re-weld. They seal the chambers completely." Gretton is hesitant. "If the Admiralty finds out I'm modifying a warship based on a cook's theory, I'll be scraping mines in the Orkneys." Lawson doesn't flinch. "If they find out we lost the Atlantic because no one listened, they'll have no mines left to scrape." 3 more days. Another test. April 2nd, 1943. Sunflower powers into open water. Trespasser submerges again, this time 1,000 yards off. The submarine's hydrophones record. Nothing. Not noise, not hum, not the low mechanical moan that always marks a convoy ship. When Trespasser surfaces, her captain signals. "Lost you at 400 yards. Hydrophones picked up only ambient noise. Lawson exhales for the first time in days. It works. A cook has just broken the laws of the Admiralty and rewritten the physics of naval warfare. The hearing of empires. April 3rd, 1943. In the oak-panelled boardroom of the Admiralty in London, the air feels heavier than the walls. Gretton stands before Admiral Sir Max Horton, Commander-in-Chief of the Western Approaches, flanked by Lawson and Dr. Harold Burrus, the same scientist who declared acoustic concealment impossible. The conversation is volcanic. "You conducted unauthorized modifications to a Royal Navy vessel," Burrus snaps. "Based on the suggestion of a cook," Gretton fires back. "A cook who silenced a ship better than your entire department." Captain Edmund Rushbrook from Naval Intelligence slams his palm on the table. "This kind of recklessness could compromise the fleet." "Compromise what?" Gretton shoots back. "Our current strategy of letting the enemy hear us from 50 miles away?" Horton raises a hand. Silence. He turns to Lawson. "Explain it." Simply. Lawson straightens, his voice steady but rough. "Sir, ship machinery makes vibration. That vibration travels through the hull, into the sea. But water, when contained, not free, Not moving can absorb that vibration. It turns the ship's noise into heat. The Germans' hydrophones hear nothing. Burrus interrupts, furious. That's impossible. Water inside a ship's structure compromises weight distribution, stability, corrosion. Not flooding, Lawson corrects. Sealed chambers. Water placed exactly where sound travels, between the machine and the hull. It's insulation, not submersion. The room is still. For a moment, even the Admiralty's arrogance falters. Rushbrook leans forward. And how long to implement? 3 days per ship, Gretton says. We proved it. No retooling required. That's absurd. It's true. Admiral Horton turns toward the window overlooking the Thames. The city outside is grey, gutted, wounded by years of air raids. Gentlemen, he says, we've lost 500,000 tons of shipping this month. If this man's idea gives us even 1 week's reprieve, I'll risk it. He turns back. Commander Gretton, you will retrofit 6 merchant ships in convoy on 184, departing Liverpool in 8 days. Mr. Lawson, you'll supervise the installations. Dr. Burrus, you will assist, even if you think this is madness. He pauses. If it works, we expand fleet-wide. If it fails, you'll both be forgotten. Lawson nods. Understood, sir. The Anatomy of Silence. April 11, 1943. Liverpool dockyards. 6 merchant ships, SS Daniel Webster, SS James Herod, SS John Davenport, SS Samuel Eliot, SS Benjamin Key, and SS William Eustace. Installation begins under rain and secrecy. Teams weld steel cylinders, each 24 inches wide, around propeller shaft housings. They install rubber bladders filled with seawater against engine mounts and steamline supports. Each ship gains 18 tons of new weight, not armor, not cargo, but silence. The process is mechanical poetry. Steam whistles, rivets clatter, torches flare blue and orange against the grey Atlantic mist. The dockyard smells of ozone and oil. When the first hydrophone test runs, the data is undeniable. Before modification, average detection range 11,7 nautical miles. After modification, 0.4 miles. A 30-fold reduction in acoustic signature. No scientist had ever achieved that on paper. A cook had done it with plumbing. Naval engineers study the results. Speechless. One writes in his report, "It appears we have made the ocean deaf." The convoy of the ghost ships. April 22nd, 1943. Convoy on 184 departs Liverpool. 43 merchant ships in 9 columns. 6 of them carry Lawson's modification. The Admiralty tells no one, not even the convoy commodore. If U-boats attack, the test will be real. German intelligence intercepts the convoy's departure. Wolfpack Group Mize, 37 submarines, moves into position across the mid-Atlantic. For 3 days, the convoy plows westward through fog and freezing spray. April 25th, 2:14 a.m. Aboard U-264, Kapitänleutnant Hartwig Lux adjusts his hydrophone gain. Contact bearing 290, multiple targets. But the signal flickers, then fades. He narrows his eyes. Intermittent? That's impossible. Ja, Herr Kapitän. Some ships loud, some very faint, some gone. Lux doesn't understand it. Hydrophones detect 27 ships, not 43. 16 have vanished acoustically, 10 are too distant. That leaves 6 ships that should be audible but aren't. He rises to periscope depth. Through the lens, he sees the formation. The convoy is real, the sound isn't. He targets only what he can hear. For the first time in the Battle of the Atlantic, silence becomes armor. Over 18 hours of attacks, 9 merchant ships are sunk. But none of them are the modified vessels. 6 ships, dispersed across the formation, pass through the Wolfpack undetected. When ON 184 reaches New York on May 7th, Gretton cables London. Modified vessels showed 0 enemy engagement despite comparable convoy positions. Acoustic dampening effective under combat conditions. Within days, the Admiralty orders full statistical analysis. The results stagger even skeptics. Pre-dampening. Average U-boat detection range 11.4 nautical miles. Post-dampening, 0.6 nautical miles. Convoy loss rate drops from 31% to 4.7%. U-boat losses increase 400%. The equation of war has reversed. The hunters are now the hunted. By July 1943, 847 ships have been modified. By December 2047, the system costs $20,000 per vessel, 1/10 the cost of a new ship. Historians will later call it the Silence Revolution. U-boat commanders will call it the vanishing. And yet, in every official report, one line remains missing: the name of the cook who made it possible. May 1943. The Atlantic changes character. For 4 years, it had been a battlefield of sound, every wave a conduit for human noise, every depth a microphone for death. But now, the sea itself begins to lie. From the bridge of U-954, Captain Lieutenant Wolfgang Drexler listens to the Atlantic through his hydrophones and hears nothing. He adjusts gain, changes filters, recalibrates the controls. The convoy should be there. The coordinates are correct, yet the ocean has gone silent. Verdammt, he mutters. It's like hunting ghosts. U-boat after U-boat reports the same confusion. Some convoys vanish mid-pursuit. Others are detected only when their escort destroyers appear overhead, dropping depth charges. The data from German Naval Command in Lorient grows desperate. Their intelligence summaries read like post-mortems. Enemy convoys no longer produce consistent hydrophone signatures. Detection range reduced from 50 miles to less than 1. Tactical coordination impossible. The core strategy of the Wolfpacks to converge from long distance based on sound collapses. Submarines that once hunted together now drift alone, deaf in an ocean that has turned traitor. In March, Allied losses reached 567,000 tons. In May, they fall to 58,000. In that same month, the Allies sink 41 U-boats, 1/4 of the Kriegsmarine's active submarine fleet. The Germans call it Schwarzer Mai, Black May, the sound of defeat. Gross Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of the U-boat arm, stares at his situation map in silence. Red pins, Allied convoys cross the Atlantic uninterrupted. Black pins, U-boats disappear. He writes in his war diary, "The enemy has achieved technical supremacy in acoustic concealment. Convoys have become nearly invisible to hydrophone surveillance. We can no longer predict attack positions. The old certainties have vanished. For a man who built an empire of steel beneath the waves, the irony is suffocating. The machine he perfected, the U-boat, now drowns in silence. Captured submarine crews echo the same disbelief. A hydrophone operator from U-264 tells his interrogators, 'Sometimes we heard the convoys from great distance. Other times, ships were right above us and we heard nothing. It was as if the ocean had gone deaf. The Atlantic, once the loudest battlefield on Earth, becomes a desert of quiet. The revenge of the machine.' At Allied headquarters, the numbers arrive like artillery. Average U-boat detection range, reduced from 11 miles to 0.6. Convoy loss rate, down 85%. U-boat losses, up 400%. The British Admiralty realizes they are witnessing not an invention, but a systemic inversion, the first time in history that silence has become an industrial weapon. The modifications scale faster than any war production program. By July 1943, 800 ships carry the water-filled acoustic dampeners. By September, over 1,000. By year's end, 2,000. It takes less than 48 hours to silence a ship. It takes less than a month to cripple the German submarine fleet. Factories that once produced torpedoes now produce silence chambers, valves, and sealed steel cylinders welded into every new hull. Shipyards in New York, Halifax, and Belfast hum with the rhythm of noise reduction. The same industrial civilization that had nearly destroyed itself with sound now begins to save itself by learning how not to be heard. The moment of realization. On May 24th, 1943, aboard HMS Sunflower, the ship that carried the first experiment, Commander Gretton stands on the deck at dawn, staring into a calm sea. For the first time in months, no ships are burning on the horizon. He lights a cigarette. "We made them deaf," he mutters. Below deck, Lawson leans over a notebook, drawing refinements to the system, new chamber shapes, better valve placement. He doesn't smile. He just works. He knows what this means. The war isn't over. But something deeper has broken, not the German fleet, but their method of perception, their confidence in the invisible order of sound. War had always been about who could see farther. Now, for the first time, victory belongs to those who could disappear more completely. Across the Atlantic, U-boat commanders abandon their positions. Convoys begin to arrive in Britain faster than ever before. Allied morale surges. Factories roar again, feeding new invasions Sicily, Italy, and soon, Normandy. But the secret remains buried. The official communiques credit radar, escort carriers, and code-breaking. The name Thomas Patrick Lawson appears nowhere. He receives no press, no medal ceremony, no speeches in Parliament. Just a quiet note in Admiralty records. Civilian assistance rendered in acoustic concealment experiment, March, April 1943, outcome favorable. That civilian had changed the sound of war. The Empire of Silence. Between May and December 1943, 237 U-boats are destroyed. 4,200 merchant sailors who would have died in the Atlantic come home alive. By 1945, over 2,000 Allied merchant ships and 164 escort vessels are fitted with Lawson's system. The total steel used, 51,000 tons less than what it takes to build 7 Liberty ships. The cost, $6.2 million, less than 1 week's worth of wartime spending. But the effect? Irreversible. The age of mechanical noise, as dominance, ends here. The machine, for the first time, learns humility. For the German Navy, silence had always been a weapon. For the Allies, it becomes salvation. And in that reversal lies the essence of collapse, not the destruction of machines, but the destruction of the assumptions behind them. The same world that believed sound was progress. The clang of factories, the hum of engines, now learns that sometimes survival depends on erasing its own noise. May 1943 will be remembered as the month when the Atlantic went quiet. And in that quiet, history changed course. Because wars are not only won by those who build louder weapons, but by those who finally understand what should never have been heard. War has always been an amplifier. It takes the quiet logic of invention and turns it into noise, into factories, convoys, engines, and death. But in 1943, amid all that noise, a cook found the only invention that mattered: how to be unheard. Thomas Lawson's idea did not emerge from laboratories or equations. It came from observation, from listening differently inside the belly of a machine. He did what industrial civilization itself had forgotten how to do. He paid attention to the texture of its own sound. Every age of progress carries an illusion that technology is neutral, that experts know best, that systems cannot lie. But the Battle of the Atlantic revealed something else. Systems can be deaf to their own noise. For years, the Royal Navy had trusted data, graphs, and naval architects. They had mapped the ocean in decibels, measured the war in frequencies, and concluded that silence was impossible. And they were right until a man with no credentials proved that they were listening to the wrong part of the problem. Lawson's discovery was not an engineering miracle. It was a philosophical correction. He didn't make the ocean quiet. He made the system humble. The paradox of progress. The industrial world was built on one commandment: more power, more production, more output. Every ship was an engine of volume, a triumph of decibels, horsepower, and velocity. But with every increase in power came an equal increase in visibility. The louder civilization grew, the easier it became to target. In 1943, that paradox reached its breaking point. Britain's survival depended not on being stronger, but on learning to vanish. And so the Liberty ship, once the loudest expression of Allied industry, became a lesson in restraint. In a world obsessed with expansion, Lawson's idea was heresy. the notion that silence could be strength. The Admiralty had thrown millions into new sonar systems, radar networks, and escort carriers all designed to detect. Yet the war turned not on detection, but on concealment. This was the inversion of the machine age, a civilization discovering that the absence of signal was sometimes the most powerful signal of all. The human frequency. Thomas Lawson did not have the language of science, but he had something rarer, a sense of rhythm. He understood that machines, like people, have voices. He heard fatigue in the turbines, pitch in the steam lines, tension in the hull. To him, the ship was not a weapon, it was a living resonance, and that's what made him dangerous to the hierarchy around him. He didn't measure the world, he listened to it. Every empire has its heretics, men who hear what systems cannot. Galileo saw motion in the stars. Tesla saw patterns in electricity. Lawson heard silence in machinery. All of them confronted the same enemy. Not ignorance, but certainty. Because the most dangerous phrase in any civilization is not, "I don't know." It is, "That's impossible." The philosophy of silence. The deeper meaning of Lawson's idea extends far beyond naval acoustics. It exposes a pattern that defines all industrial progress. The moment technology begins to serve itself, it stops serving the human mind that created it. The Admiralty believed in control, in command structures, in experts, in rigid systems of truth. But the ocean doesn't obey control, it obeys physics, and sometimes intuition sees what formulas miss. Lawson's silence wasn't the opposite of technology, it was its redemption. It turned the machine's greatest flaw, vibration, into its own defense. He did not fight the system, he retuned it. In that sense, the story of 1943 is not about submarines or ships. It's about the rediscovery of humility, the understanding that even the most complex civilization must sometimes quiet itself to survive. Because when machines become too loud, they reveal too much. And when systems refuse to listen, they become predictable and therefore mortal. The industrial front reversal. Every industrial empire eventually meets its own echo. For the German U-boats, that echo came from silence itself. They had built a perfect system of hearing, and it was destroyed by the one sound they could not detect. None at all. This was more than technological defeat. It was philosophical collapse. The machine that once represented the triumph of science over chaos had been undone by a man who simply noticed what everyone else ignored. In the post-war years, engineers would refine Lawson's idea into the Prairie Masker system, replacing water chambers with compressed air bubbles, embedding silence into the DNA of every modern warship. The principle remains the same. Control the sound, control visibility, control survival. But the lesson is older, deeper, and human. Progress is not measured by how loud a civilization can speak, but by how well it can listen. The industrial world continues to build engines, networks, and data systems that scream louder every year. But the truth that Thomas Lawson found in 1943 still applies. The survival of complex systems depends on their ability to hear their own noise and to silence it before it destroys them. Because sometimes, the next great revolution doesn't come from invention. It comes from restraint. June 1945. London. The war in Europe is over. Flags hang from shattered windows. Brass bands echo between buildings that no longer have roofs. The Atlantic convoys have stopped sailing. Their job is done. In a small naval office, a medal is handed to a man who doesn't want it. Thomas Patrick Lawson, age 30, stands in an ill-fitting suit before an officer's desk. The citation reads, "For service in acoustic concealment research, Western Approaches Command." The medal. The British Empire Medal. He accepts it quietly, thanks the officer, and leaves through a side door. There are no photographers, no applause, no recognition. Just a man walking back into anonymity, the cook who taught the ocean to go silent. After the war, Lawson returns to Boston. He opens a diner in Dorchester, small, unremarkable. The sign reads, Lawson's Grill. He cooks breakfast for dock workers and policemen the same way he did before the war. When customers ask if he ever served, he nods once. Merchant Marine, he says. Nothing more. His wife doesn't know the full story until 1978, when a British naval historian tracks him down for a book about convoy innovations. By then, the world has forgotten. The Liberty ships are scrap. The U-boats are rust. The Atlantic is quiet again. Lawson dies in 1991. His obituary in the Boston Globe calls him a retired restaurant owner and merchant marine veteran. No mention of the system that saved 4,000 lives. No mention of the fact that a high school dropout with a notebook altered the geometry of war. At his funeral, 3 elderly British naval officers attend men who once served on convoy escorts in 1943 and survived because U-boats never heard them coming. One of them places a note inside the casket. It reads, "Because of you, we came home." The afterlife of silence. Decades later, the technology lives on. Modern American warships carry its descendant, the Prairie Masker system, a network of perforated pipes along the hull that releases streams of compressed air bubbles, forming a curtain of acoustic concealment. Every submarine hunter, every destroyer, every carrier task group moves through the ocean shrouded in artificial quiet. The principle is unchanged. Control vibration, absorb resonance, deny the enemy your sound. Silence, once a miracle, is now standard issue. The Cook's Notebook became a doctrine. In the U.S. Naval Academy's leadership curriculum, a case study appears under the title, "The Cook Who Changed the Battle of the Atlantic." The closing line reads, "Innovation doesn't require credentials, only observation, courage, and the willingness to challenge consensus." It's a simple sentence, but it carries the weight of an age. The machine remembers. When the last Liberty ships were scrapped, workers reported finding strange welded cylinders near the propeller shafts filled with stagnant seawater, sealed since 1943. No one knew what they were at first. They were remnants of silence, forgotten fragments of an idea that once saved a civilization. Even now, beneath the Atlantic, rusted hulls rest in the deep. Some are loud, broken open, groaning in currents, but some are quiet, perfectly still. Their chambers still sealed, their silence intact. They no longer carry cargo or men. They carry a message that in the age of machines, the smallest act of awareness can still outweigh the largest system of logic. The ocean never forgets. It keeps every vibration, every scream, every echo of the machines that once tried to master it. But somewhere beneath those layers of sound lies a single frequency that changed everything, the frequency of nothing. Because in 1943, for one brief moment, humanity learned how to hide from itself. And in that silence, amid the steel and salt and pressure, a Cook proved that sometimes the most powerful sound in the industrial age is the one you never hear.